Hi there guys, I hope you have had a good day. Now, when being asked about his weight obviously moving up to heavyweight, Oleksandr Usyk said that he doesn't want to put on too much weight because he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to put on too much weight and become less efficient than he is in the ring. That is his biggest attribute going up to heavyweight. He's never going to be a big heavyweight. So what's the point in putting on all of this size when he's always going to be a smaller heavyweight anyway? Now, he said about Ruiz and Joshua, the second fight, and he said, I think the refrigerator is the one that won. Now, obviously, that's a jibe at Andy Ruiz because Andy Ruiz did gain quite a bit of weight. Not a lot. I mean, it was like a stone, I think. Andy Ruiz is a big guy. He's always going to be a bigger, chubby kind of guy. And he is a smaller heavyweight, just like Usyk, but it's a different kind of like attributes that he has. Oleksandr Usyk is a brilliant mover, excellent footwork, fast and efficient, and he does get hit, but he's quite elusive. Not as elusive as like Lomachenko. Lomachenko kind of has it all. Usyk does get hit, which is something he'll have to work on in the heavyweight division. But still, Usyk is better off staying lighter because he moves so well on his feet. Whereas Ruiz can be big, yet still have fast hands. He needs faster feet. But I think that being heavier for Ruiz kind of plays into his own attributes. Because, as I said, he's a fast guy. He doesn't look fast though. I mean, you can watch him a million times on the pads and in the ring. Yet when you see him outside of the ring, you think, that guy can't move fast. He just can't. Look at him. There's no way he can move that fast. Yet he can. So when talking about Oleksandr Usyk gaining weight for his turn in the heavyweight division, he doesn't need to. Ruiz needs to be a little bit heavier because that's what works for him. Usyk, again, is a mover. Whereas Andy Ruiz Jr. isn't necessarily a mover. He does need to move a little bit better and a little bit more efficiently because against Anthony Joshua in the second fight, he just could not close that distance. His footwork and the speed of his feet just wasn't good enough in order to close down the distance because Joshua was dictating the distance, the tempo, and everything else about the fight. And that was where Andy Ruiz Jr. came unstuck. Andy Ruiz Jr. cannot dictate those things because he does not have the physical attributes in order to do so. He is the smaller guy. Also, he's the heavier guy, so doesn't move as well. So if Anthony Joshua drags him into a boxing match on the back foot, then Ruiz is always out of range for the whole fight. And that's what Anthony Joshua done in that second fight with Ruiz. Whereas Oleksandr Usyk has a great engine, brilliant mover. He doesn't seem to get tired in fights, considering how much he does. And so that means that gaining weight for Oleksandr Usyk would probably be detrimental in doing that because Usyk isn't the biggest puncher. His knockouts come from accumulation, not one big punch. So putting on a little bit of extra weight to try and bring out his punching power and make him punch harder isn't going to work because, as I said, he's not a big puncher. He's never going to be. If he wasn't a big puncher in the cruiserweight division, then he's not going to be in the heavyweight division. But what he can do is throw punches in bunches at angles as well. I mean, at one point against Tony Bellew dropped his gloves and started bobbing and weaving, trying to duck under shots. Yet Usyk still caught him. Usyk's accuracy is brilliant. That is his strength. So why not play to his strengths? So he doesn't need to put on too much weight. Look at like David Haye. Still stayed around like 15 stone. He could have still made cruiserweight if he wanted to, yet he was fighting heavyweights. But his biggest attributes were his size, oddly enough. He was a small heavyweight, but he used that to his advantage. A tall guy can use physical attributes in order to beat a smaller guy, but a smaller guy can also use their height as their biggest attribute. If they get low, they can come under shots, and a bigger guy doesn't necessarily like punching down. And also, when a bigger guy is punching down, a lot of their power is diminished because unless they are really working in those shots and twisting their hips, then there's not going to be the same kind of power on the shots, especially if you think that most of the power will come at the end of the punch. Whereas if a smaller guy can get on the inside, get low, come under those shots, then they're going to be bobbing and weaving and missing those shots, or they're going to be catching them or going with the punch, rolling with the punch. So in that sense, that makes it easier for Usyk to use his physical attributes if he is a lighter weight. Whereas if he puts on too much weight, he's not going to be moving as well on his feet. He won't have the same engine going late. So the important thing for Oleksandr Usyk is going to be using his physical attributes, playing to his strengths. There's no point in him trying to be a big heavyweight because he's never going to be. He's what, 6'3" and probably around 210 pounds. He doesn't need to be any more than that because he's a smaller heavyweight anyway. Look at David Haye. When he made his comeback, he tried to be a bigger heavyweight. Earlier on in his career, when he did move up to heavyweight, he maintained that kind of cruiserweight kind of style, I guess, but he didn't try and put on too much weight. In his comeback, he was trying to be the big heavyweight. Did not work for him at all. Now, Oleksandr Usyk also said that bigger heavyweights do not lose weight because of laziness and a reluctance to train. Obviously, they don't have to make weight, so they don't constantly have to be watching what they're eating. So they can go in 2 or 3 pounds heavier. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they weigh because ultimately they don't have to make a weight. Now, it does matter what they weigh considering what fight they are having. Look at Anthony Joshua in the Ruiz rematch. Got his weight down and had that engine. That movement was brilliant, but he had to be at a lighter weight to pull that off. Whereas against someone like Carlos Takam, who's kind of there, sitting on the chest, trading on the inside a little bit more, and obviously working up close, he was a lot heavier. So you can see how it changes considering the opponent. Anthony Joshua got his weight right for the Andy Ruiz Jr. rematch, and he changes his weight considering his opponent. There is no reason why a heavyweight should not be thinking that they are a heavyweight and therefore do not have to make weight, meaning it does not matter what they weigh in at. That's not it. That's not true. They have to make sure their weight is the perfect weight for their opponent, for what game plan they want to execute. Fighters who have weight restrictions have to abide by that anyway, because obviously there's a weight restriction, so that's meaning that it's an even playing field because guys weigh the same. Although they don't, because they make weight. So one fighter might be heavier than the other. Take George Groves versus Chris Eubank Jr. for instance. Chris Eubank Jr. likely went into the fight at 12 stone, 168. Probably what he weighed in at. Obviously, he weighed in at 168, and he likely went into the fight at 168, not putting on really any weight. George Groves weighs in at 168, likely went into the ring at 180, 185. So you can see that there is still a difference in weight between the opponents despite being in the same weight division. And what did George Groves do in that fight? He made it a fight where Chris Eubank Jr. had to try and close the distance, and anytime he did, there was a hard right hand waiting for him when he rushed in, and that stopped him, that kept him on the inside. His dad was telling him throughout the whole fight, you've got to get close to him, but it's not easy getting close to a George Groves who punches very, very hard, and there is always that right hand, 1-2, jab right hand, coming at him anytime he tries to close that distance. George Groves used his superior size and strength against Chris Eubank Jr., as I said, hitting him hard and often. Anytime they got in close, George Groves wrapped him up and turned him on the ropes, going back to the centre of the ring where he has the space behind him, taking centre ring, meaning that George Groves was controlling everything, so using his physical attributes, being maybe 10, 15 pounds heavier than Chris Eubank Jr., using those attributes to his favour. It's no different in the heavyweight division. You use your physical attributes to your advantage. And just because heavyweights do not have to make weight, that does not mean that weight is not important to them. Their weight is very important, just as important as in the lower weight divisions. So that being said, Oleksandr Usyk has said he does not need to gain any weight. He does not need to lose any weight. Obviously, he wouldn't lose weight going up to heavyweight anyway, but still, he does not need to put on any weight. He does not need to try and improve his punching power or anything like that because his attributes don't play to those factors anyway. He's a lighter guy. He's a small heavyweight. He's always going to be a small heavyweight. What is the point in a small heavyweight trying to be the bigger heavyweight in the fight? Look at David Haye. That's a prime example. A small heavyweight trying to be a bigger heavyweight in the fight in his comeback. It did not work for him, and it wouldn't work for Oleksandr Usyk because his attributes aren't that anyway. His attributes are his movement, his abilities, his skill, and his engine as well. If he puts on weight, he can't move his feet as fast. He's not as efficient. He's going to tire. He's not going to have that engine. So putting on extra weight to go up to heavyweight would mean that Usyk is kind of taking away all of his attributes, all of the things that make him so brilliant. So what's the point in putting on excess weight when he doesn't need to? He's a small heavyweight, as I said. I've said it many times in this video. He's always going to be a small heavyweight. But that does not mean he cannot be efficient and effective as a heavyweight. That means he can use his physical attributes to his advantage and turn the fight in his favor. He's technically good enough, he's skillful enough to do it. So those are his strengths. He's not going to be a big bruiser, puncher, or anything like that. As soon as he deviates from what he is good at, that is when he will come unstuck in the heavyweight division. He can use his attributes to his favor. That is what is important for Usyk coming up to the heavyweight division. Anyway, guys, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe if you are new. Thanks, guys.